Welcome to the debate. Right now, nearly 60% of married couples are, well, they're about to step into a trap they simply do not see coming. They are going to retire in different years.
Yeah.
And, while a financial planner might look at the math and call that a perfectly optimized staggered retirement strategy, behavioral psychologists often look at that exact same scenario as a total recipe for resentment, isolation, and frankly, sometimes even divorce.
It is. It is arguably the most massive structural shift a relationship will ever endure. Think about it. You spend decades of a marriage operating on the exact same clock.
Right, the morning commute.
Exactly. The commute, the evening return, the constraints of the workday dictate your entire shared reality. And then suddenly you just shatter that shared cadence.
You shatter it, yeah. And the stakes couldn't be higher. So today, we are looking at what couples should do when one partner is finally ready to stop working. When that moment arrives, should the second partner aggressively orchestrate their own exit to preserve the shared lifestyle, or should they keep working?
Right.
I will argue that couples absolutely must synchronize their retirement as closely as possible to avoid the profound relationship strain of mismatched lives.
And I take the opposing view, arguing that staggered retirement, where one partner strategically keeps working, is actually the ultimate safety net, offering a crucial financial buffer and a smoother lifestyle transition.
So to understand why a simultaneous exit is so critical, we really have to look past the bank accounts for a second and look at the biological and emotional reality of finite time.
Sure.
But I know you view the financial aspect as the actual foundation of that emotional reality.
I absolutely do. Because you can't separate them. Let's get right into the mechanics of that sudden change. Because, look, it is not just about money. It is about neurochemistry.
Okay, neurochemistry?
Yeah. For 30 or 40 years, a couple has been in this strict habit of accumulation. Their brains are literally hardwired to release dopamine when they save money, when they, hit their 401k match, when they see the account balances grow.
Right, the rewarding system.
Exactly. And suddenly you're asking both of them to flip a psychological switch on the exact same Tuesday and move into decumulation.
Meaning they have to start actively draining the reservoir that they
spent their entire lives filling.
Yeah.
And psychologically, spending that money without new income replacing it feels like a biological threat to their survival. If both partners retire simultaneously, especially in, let's say, a volatile market, that panic is massively amplified.
So you're saying the working spouse acts as a buffer?
A huge psychological buffer, yes. Think of it like decompression stops for a scuba diver. If you both shoot to the surface of retirement at the exact same time, the marriage gets the bends.
Wow. The bends.
The pressure change is just too violent. Staggering the exit lets your psychological identity adjust to the new environment. It allows the retired spouse to, experiment with hobbies or maybe pick up part-time gigs without the sheer financial terror of watching the bank account drain.
Okay, I like the scuba analogy, I really do. But let's look at what is actually happening at that decompression stop.
Okay.
You are prioritizing the safety of the portfolio over the physical and emotional safety of the partner who surfaced first.
Oh, come on, that's...
No, really. You talk about avoiding financial panic, but what about the crushing loneliness that hits the newly retired partner when they're suddenly home alone 5 days a week?
But surely a grown adult can entertain themselves, right? They can find a community without their spouse literally holding their hand.
It is not just about being bored. And it's not about lacking independence. It is a documented physiological response. We always hear that medical statistic, right? That chronic isolation is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day in terms of mortality risk.
Right, the 15 cigarette stat.
But let's break down exactly why that happens. When a person is suddenly cut off from their primary social structure,
which was the workplace,
which for decades was the workplace, and now their spouse is still gone 50 hours a week, their body reacts to that isolation as a literal threat. It chronically elevates cortisol levels. The nervous system gets locked into this constant state of low-grade fight or flight, and that causes systemic inflammation. It does measurable, cumulative physical damage.
Look, I don't dispute the health risks of severe isolation, but you're conflating a temporary transition period with, permanent solitary confinement.
But for someone in their mid-60s, a 5-year transition period is a massive percentage of their remaining active life.
Well,
It assumes that the primary companion they envision spending this specific chapter of life with is completely unavailable. I mean, they didn't retire to join a solo book club. They retired with a shared vision of Tuesday morning hikes and, spontaneous road trips.
right. The dream.
Exactly. But instead, they are waiting by the window at 5:30 p.m. for an exhausted spouse to come home. So I have to ask, is delaying those shared dreams really worth the extra savings if your health fails in the meantime?
Okay, that is a very powerful emotional argument, but it completely ignores the brutal math of healthcare in this country.
The math always comes back to healthcare, doesn't it?
Because it has to. Let's talk about sequence of returns risk interacting with medical costs. If one spouse retires at 62, finding private market insurance or utilizing COBRA before Medicare kicks in at 65,
Yeah, it's expensive.
it can absolutely decimate a portfolio. It is not just, quote unquote, extra savings. The working spouse provides the bridge.
The healthcare bridge.
Yes, they maintain the employer-sponsored health insurance. That specific mechanical benefit removes an immense, crushing anxiety from the entire household.
I understand the health insurance gap, I do, but let's look at the daily, 5 p.m. reality of providing that bridge. Because you are painting a picture where the working spouse heroically provides insurance and the retired spouse just happily waits at home.
Well, happily or functionally.
But the reality is daily friction. Let's talk about the mismatched routines and the chore divide.
Okay, yes, the domestic division of labor inevitably shifts. I'll grant you that.
It shifts, but not how people expect it to. Logically, the working spouse assumes, well, I am putting in 40 hours a week at the firm to provide our health insurance, so my retired partner will naturally take over the cooking, the cleaning, the yard work, the errands. Right. If you have 100% of the free time, you manage the household. It is basic efficiency.
It sounds perfectly equitable on paper. It is efficient until you look at human nature and the actual data.
Okay, what does the data say?
Startling research shows that the retired partner typically only increases their household contributions to about 40% of the total household hours.
Wait, really? Only 40%?
Yes, they absolutely do not take over the whole domain.
But why wouldn't they? If they are home all day, what is the psychological bottleneck there?
Because of how they view the milestone of retirement. The retired partner views their retirement as a hard-earned reward. They have crossed the finish line of their laboring years. They want to read, they want to relax, they want to hit the golf course.
They categorically do not want to become a full-time domestic worker. So what happens? The working spouse comes home, completely drained from corporate stress, expecting dinner and a pristine house.
And they don't get it.
Right. Instead, they find their partner asking, "What are we doing tonight? I'm bored." So the working spouse is now shouldering the stress of paid work and still managing the majority of the mental load at home. The resentment is immediate, and it is highly toxic.
Look, I understand the friction you are describing, but you are taking the turbulence of the initial transition and projecting it as a permanent state of marital failure.
It feels permanent when you're washing dishes at 9 p.m. after a long commute.
Yes, the chores become a battleground initially, but if we look at the Cornell University study on this exact dynamic, the long-term findings tell a very, very different story.
I really struggle to see how that level of daily resentment over a dirty kitchen and a tired spouse magically transforms into a healthy marriage.
Well, it isn't magic. It is adaptation. The study acknowledges that the transition to retirement is indeed particularly stressful when one spouse retires before the other. We agree on that.
Right.
However, the study also clearly shows that couples who stagger their retirement, push through that initial friction, and actively negotiate their new dynamic actually report the highest levels of marital happiness and the fewest conflicts over the long term.
How exactly are they achieving that? Because actively negotiating sounds like a very polite, academic way of saying they fight until someone just gives up.
No, they achieve it by forcing healthy boundary setting. Think about what happens when you both retire on the exact same day. It is incredibly easy to fall into this suffocating codependence.
You mean doing everything together?
Exactly. You become this single entity that goes to the grocery store together, goes to the post office together, and you completely lose your individual identity. Staggered retirement breaks that default. The working spouse is forced to articulate, look, I need an hour of quiet to decompress when I get home. The retired spouse learns to say, I need you to be fully present on Saturday, no checking emails. They stop relying on the sheer quantity of time spent together and are forced to prioritize the quality of shared time. It forces intentionality.
Setting boundaries is essential. Sure, I agree with that. But in a staggered retirement, those boundaries often harden into walls. You are living in two completely different psychological ecosystems.
I wouldn't call them walls.
They are. The empathy starts to erode. The working spouse fundamentally cannot understand why the retired spouse is tired from, quote-unquote, doing nothing, and the retired spouse cannot understand why the working spouse is having a total meltdown over a Tuesday morning staff meeting. The shared context of their lives just evaporates.
But sometimes that shared context needs to evolve, especially when the two individuals are peaking at different times in their lives.
What do you mean, peaking at different times?
Let's look at a real-world edge case that happens all the time. Consider a woman, let's call her Joan.
Okay, Joan.
Joan is a 58-year-old corporate leader. Her husband is 63, totally burned out, and he absolutely should retire. But Joan is hitting her absolute stride. She has a massive job, she manages a great team, she wields real influence, and she explicitly says she gets juice and energy from her work.
Right, she's at the top of her game.
Exactly. Why on earth should Joan be forced to abandon her purpose, her identity, and her peak earning years just because her husband's professional clock ran out faster? Personal fulfillment for the working spouse has to be respected in a modern marriage. Joan's husband needs to respect that she is still building her legacy.
I am absolutely not suggesting Joan shouldn't have purpose or that she should be forced out of a career she loves.
Good.
What I am challenging is how Joan's continued corporate ascent actively impacts their shared vision. Marriage isn't just a financial arrangement or a roommate agreement. It is a shared life.
Yes, but
if Joan's husband has spent the last decade dreaming of, spending 3 months in a camper van exploring the national parks while they still have their mobility.
The classic RV dream.
Right, but Joan is locked into quarterly earnings reports for the next 10 years. They are functionally living separate lives. She is getting her juice from the boardroom. He is looking at a sunset in Wyoming by himself.
They are living independent lives for a season, and the financial security Joan is providing during that 10-year gap might be exactly what allows them to afford world-class healthcare or travel first class in their 70s without a trace of financial anxiety.
That assumes they make it to their 70s with their affection for one another intact. We have to look at the psychological toll of FOMO and JOMO during that season.
Fear of missing out and joy of missing out.
Exactly. So the retired husband sits at home feeling intense FOMO because he isn't part of the bustling, important world his wife still inhabits. He feels irrelevant.
Or he finds a hobby.
Or conversely, the working wife is sitting in a sterile conference room on a beautiful Tuesday feeling intense jealousy because her husband is out playing tennis. But you know what the real structural danger to the marriage is? It's JOMO.
The joy of missing out? Explain how finding joy is a danger.
Because of where the joy is derived. The husband develops JOMO regarding his wife's presence. He starts to prefer his solo life. He figures out his own routine, his own pace, his own friends.
Right?
He actually starts to resent it when Joan's rigid work schedule dictates their weekend plans, or when she finally does retire and disrupts the peaceful ecosystem he built over the last decade. If he develops the joy of missing out on his wife's company, that is the first step toward living as roommates, not partners. Deep communication and a shared action plan become nearly impossible if your fundamental priorities for how to spend a Tuesday afternoon are split for a decade.
I completely disagree that JOMO inevitably leads to living as roommates. I think you are looking at independence as a threat rather than an asset.
How is it not a threat to the partnership?
Because if the husband finds joy in his independent routine, he is becoming a whole interesting person outside of his career and outside of his marriage. That's a huge positive. When Joan eventually retires, he isn't clinging to her for his entire social and emotional survival. He has a robust community and a fulfilling life to welcome her into.
That works in theory, but it ignores the emotional decay that happens in the interim. You cannot put a price tag on lost shared context. The inside jokes disappear because they aren't experiencing the world together. The casual everyday intimacy fades.
I think you are vastly underestimating the resilience of a mature marriage. Couples who successfully navigate staggered retirement do so by creating a new shared routine. It is not about doing everything together. It is about establishing non-negotiable touch points.
Touch points like what?
They agree to wake up and drink coffee together for 20 minutes before the working spouse leaves. They take a walk together every evening after dinner completely without their phones. They dedicate the weekend strictly to couple activities. Staggered retirement actually protects the individual identities of both people.
Well, it is a complex tightrope, and I think we have thoroughly mapped the dangers on both sides of this decision today. This is an intensely important choice that sets the trajectory for the final chapters of life.
Absolutely.
If we strip away the financial math, my core belief comes down to this. Time is the single resource you cannot compound, earn, or get back. The biological and emotional toll of living in different time zones, the elevated cortisol of isolation, the erosion of shared context, the chore divide resentment, it makes retiring as closely together as possible the absolute best path. You have to protect the marriage itself from the drift.
And from my perspective, protecting the marriage means protecting its foundation. The sudden, traumatic shock of dual identity loss, combined with the sheer terror of simultaneous decumulation, is just too great a threat for many couples. The financial cushion, the maintenance of vital health benefits before Medicare, and the respect for the personal fulfillment of a spouse who is still peaking, well, that makes a strategically staggered retirement the smarter, safer bet. It is a necessary decompression stop.
Yet, despite our opposing views on the timing and the strategy, I think we have total convergence on the execution. This transition is intensely vulnerable. You cannot just wing it, cross your fingers, and hope the pieces fall into place.
Oh, absolutely not. Whether you hold hands and jump into the void of retirement on the exact same day, or you stagger the transition over 5 to 10 years, survival depends on rigorous, almost uncomfortable levels of communication.
Yeah, you have to sit down and literally renegotiate the domestic contract. You have to look at the actual math of your cash flow, acknowledge the psychological shift of spending your savings, and create a joint action plan that covers daily routines, social expectations, and financial boundaries.
Right. And you have to execute that plan with immense grace. The working spouse has to forgive the retired spouse for not running the house like a military operation.
Yes.
And the retired spouse has to forgive the working spouse for having nothing left in the tank at the end of the day.
Which brings us to a really critical next step for anyone listening. If you are standing on the edge of this exact transition, whether you are the partner eager to leave the workforce or the one hitting your stride like Joan, you cannot navigate these waters in isolation. You need a blueprint and you need support.
Completely agree. We strongly urge you to get involved with the Active Retirement Network community at activeretirementnetwork.com. This isn't just about reading, standard financial advice articles. It is a vibrant, interactive place where you can connect with people facing these precise tensions.
It is a community where you can take on challenges and find new opportunities. You can learn how to negotiate these massive life shifts with their content and courses. And importantly, you can get access to the 7 C's Toolkit, which is practically mandatory reading for building the shared action plan we just talked about.
Yeah, the toolkit is fantastic. You can also tap into coaching and consulting. But beyond the resources, you will find a community of people led by founders Dan Flora and Jim DeMacher, who genuinely care about you as you step into your next chapter. Their entire mission is to be a beacon of support, so you don't have to figure this out alone. Because ultimately, the goal isn't just to stop working. The goal is to build a life you actually want to live.
Well said. For decades, you and your partner have been running on the same clock. When the alarm rings on that final day of work for one of you, the clock doesn't stop. It just changes its rhythm. Whether you stay in step together or intentionally run at different speeds for a season, the ultimate victory is crossing that final finish line holding hands.
The question you have to answer together is, what strategy will keep you both standing when you get there?